Marcus arrived before the sun, the way he always did. The city was still shaking the sleep from its bones, streetlights winking out one by one while bakery trucks hissed at the curb, and the Hudson turned from gray to pewter. He swiped his badge at the loading dock of Barclay and Green Investments and waited for the green light, hands tucked into the sleeves of his thin jacket. 11 floors above them, smart glass would soon brighten over a forest of screens. Markets would wake, men in polished shoes would stride in, and 1,000 decisions would be made before a single coffee cooled. He pushed the cart inside. The wheels complained at the first seam of marble, a familiar squeak-squeak that made security guards lift their chins in recognition. One of them, Ruiz, tipped his cap. "Morning, Marcus. Got your helper today?" Marcus smiled as Leah skipped in behind him, backpack snug against her shoulders, braid sliding down like a rope. "Morning, Mr. Ruiz," she chimed. Her sneakers were worn smooth at the sides, but her eyes, those were sharp enough to leave a mark. "You two beat the dawn," Ruiz said. "Best time to shine," Marcus answered. He always said it, a joke and a truth. Then, lower to Leah. 15 minutes, then homework. "Okay." 15, she said, though they both knew she'd stretch time like taffy if she could. The screens upstairs would start glowing soon, and numbers would begin to move. Leah didn't need sound to hear them. She felt them the way other people felt weather pressure dropping, fronts colliding, a storm threading itself together from thin blue air. They rode the freight elevator up with boxes of paper towels and a crate of hand soap. Leah leaned her shoulder against the wall and watched the buttons stutter. 3, 7, 11, 19. She loved these early minutes, the quiet just before money started to talk. He set her in a leather chair near the lobby with instructions. "Stay put, be small, read if you can." She nodded and pulled out a spiral notebook whose corners had gone fuzzy with use. On the first page was a hand-drawn table of stock tickers she tracked for sport. On the second page, a mess of arrows, little stars, and notes like EPS versus FCF. Check the footnotes. She drew quickly, as if catching a bird, and then let her eyes drift to the mounted TV. The sound was off, but the crawl was alive. Green for up, red for down, white for the things not yet brave enough to decide. Her father's cart squeaked away. Leah watched him until he turned the corner, tall, careful shoulders already bearing the day, and then she looked back to the screen. Harbridge Corp. Slid past at the bottom. She almost didn't notice it. Then she saw the percentage, the week-over-week climb outpacing the sector by a full point. She sat up, tucked one foot beneath her thigh, and scratched a number in the margin. Harbridge's story was familiar, a darling of the new economy, a portfolio of AI-adjacent patents, executives who smiled like fortune-tellers. Richard Ellison Barclay and Green's Golden Boy had gone on a podcast and compared them to a Tesla in software. The internet had loved that. Leah had not. Something in the last filing had snagged at her. Not in the big picture, the press release with glossy photos, but in the footnotes, a 2-line mention of a Japanese subsidiary whose debt was being restructured to optimize international tax posture. She'd stared at those words, the slipperiness of them, long enough to see what they were hiding. She felt the same way now, watching the crawl. Numbers were honest in one way, what you told them to count. They counted, but dishonest in another. If you pushed hard enough and fast enough, you could make wind look like weight. Marcus polished the bronze plaque near the boardroom door. His reflection was a hazy ghost in the metal. He liked this part of the building. The plaque commemorated a founder from the 1960s who had insisted on paying the night shift the same as the day shift. "Everybody's light matters," the man had once said. Marcus had read that line 100 times and carried it with him like a lucky coin. He adjusted the cart, checked the corners of the frame for dust with a folded towel, and peeked into the boardroom, where men were beginning to gather. Richard Ellison was already pacing, jacket unbuttoned, hair slicked back, as if to cut the air before him. He had the kind of smile that felt like a finger you had to shake. "Gentlemen," he said to the room, and to the one woman at the table, a junior partner with a pen balanced on one finger. "Today we press the advantage. Harbridge before the street wakes up." "We're pretty concentrated already," someone said. "Concentrated is how you smell victory," Richard answered, and the line landed with just enough swagger to make a couple of heads nod. Marcus pulled the cart past the open door. Leah walked beside him, notebook pressed to her chest, eyes snagging on the graph projected on the far wall. It looked like a mountain slope in late winter, steep, shining, and just beginning to crack. "They're about to lose money," she whispered. "Leah," Marcus warned softly, eyes forward. "But—" "No, baby." "Not here," she bit her lip and obeyed, but the numbers were already flying behind her eyes, arranging themselves in a pattern she couldn't ignore. By the time Richard ended with a snap, "Buy it now before it doubles," her lungs were tight with unspent words. The boardroom door opened. Laughter slid into the hall like polished shoes. Richard led the pack, ringed by men whose watches could pay a year of rent. He caught sight of Leah and slowed. "What is this, a daycare?" he said. "We running a community center now?" Marcus stepped forward. "Morning, Mr. Ellison." "She's just waiting. I'm almost finished." Richard looked from father to daughter, then cocked his head. Leah held his gaze. She'd learned it from her grandmother. If a dog thinks you're afraid, it chases. If it knows you see it, sometimes it sits. "Teach your daughter not to snoop around places meant for grown-ups," Richard said. Leah didn't flinch. "You're ignoring the reports from the Japanese subsidiary," she said, voice steady. "Their debt will drag the whole company down. In 3 days, that stock will crash." Silence fell so fast that Marcus felt it settle on his shoulders like dust. A couple of executives glanced at Richard as if waiting for him to flick the moment off his cuff. "Someone record this," he said finally, a short, incredulous laugh snaring on the words. "The janitor's kid thinks she's a market analyst." "Say it again, sweetheart," a younger man said, phone already in hand. "What time is the market going to crash?" Leah's face didn't change. "Wednesday, 10:42 a.m. Richard took a half step closer, lowering himself to her eye level like a man addressing a toddler. "Listen here. You might have memorized a few numbers off your daddy's phone, but this isn't a mobile game. This is Wall Street. Numbers are numbers anywhere you put them," she said. Marcus felt heat bloom under his collar. "That's enough," he whispered. "We're going." They walked away. Leah didn't look back. She clutched her notebook to keep her hands from shaking. Marcus wanted to scold her. He wanted to hug her. Instead, he put a hand on her braid and said, 15 minutes of homework. "Then fries, large fries," she said, trying on a smile. He made it through the rest of his rounds by habit. Wipe, straighten, check the trash cans by the kitchenette, return to the cart for window spray. He worked as he'd taught himself to live after Leah's mother had gone keep moving. Keep the small things clean. Leave room for the big things to surprise you. Wednesday came the way all ordinary disasters come, bright, unsuspecting, wrapped in the soft tissue of routine. The trading floor hummed by 9:30. Richard swaggered between desks, a general among soldiers who were all watching him out of the corner of their eyes. He told them to keep their hands steady and their nerves steady, and he liked that sentence enough to say it twice. At 10:41, something small in the air changed. A shiver passed through the screens. People would later describe it as a flicker, an oddness like a hiccup. At 10:42, the red line on the main screen took a plunge so sharp it drew a collective gasp, the sound of 100 mouths forgetting how to stay closed. Harbridge down 7% in 2 minutes. Is that a glitch? It's not a glitch, there's volume. Who's dumping who's? The room fractured into motion. Phones rang. Coffee sloshed. Orders hit the wire and bounced back from the volatility halt like stones off a frozen pond. Richard told them to stay calm with his mouth, while the skin near his eyes tightened. He had gone all in on camera and, more dangerously, in the mirror. He'd called it, sworn by it, named it destiny. The market wasn't just punishing a position, it was pulling his last few weeks by the roots. Down another 5. They just halted, the junior analyst said, voice chalky with disbelief. He was the only one who didn't pretend his fingers weren't shaking. Sir, she predicted this. The girl, the janitor's daughter. She said it would happen. What girl? Richard snapped, though he knew which one, though he could see her face so clearly that he felt like he had already turned toward it. The one you told to stop snooping. She said it would crash at 10:42. The room went still in a way that wasn't silence at all. It was attention concentrating itself like light through a glass. Downstairs, Leah and Marcus shared fries on a bench, because they kept their promises to each other even when the world didn't. Marcus's phone buzzed itself toward the edge of the seat. He had 32 unread messages and an article link with the headline, Harbridge halted amid sudden sell-off. Leah dipped a fry in ketchup and waited for her father to put the pieces together. He did, slowly, like a man opening a letter he already knew he should not read in public. By afternoon, the clip of Leah speaking in the hall had gone everywhere that clips go when they are the right mix of clarity and disbelief. The video made her look smaller and braver than she felt. Wednesday, 10:42 a.m., she'd said into a camera neither she nor her father had seen. It was the kind of clip that turned into a story, and the kind of story that turned into a cudgel. On talk shows, hosts used it to scold Wall Street for arrogance. On finance YouTube, commentators slowed it down to marvel at nerve. In the whisper-thin halls of Barclay and Green, senior partners repeated her name with an air that hovered between awe and irritation. Richard watched it once in his office with the door closed, then again, so that some portion of his brain would agree to believe. When the video ended, he opened a file drawer that he had not opened for 3 days, pulled out the Japanese subsidiary report from Harbridge, and stared at the 2 lines that Leah had seen. He had printed it, which meant at some point he had believed it mattered. He had not read it, which meant at some point he had believed that who gave him a warning mattered more than the warning itself. 2 mornings later, a man with a press badge and a crisp tie approached Leah and Marcus in the lobby. "Are you Leah Marcus?" he asked gently, as if approaching a wild bird. In the space of 1 hour, the lobby turned into a hive, cameras, questions, hands holding microphones like torches. "Did you really give the time? How did you know? Who taught you?" Leah had never liked the way adults asked questions that were already statements in disguise. She answered anyway. "Math doesn't lie," she said. "People just don't like hearing the truth when it comes from the wrong mouth." That night she opened her notebook at the kitchen table. the one Marcus had rescued from a curb and sanded until it felt like it had always belonged to them. On the page, she wrote, "They love the miracle more than the girl." And even as she wrote it, she felt the fairness of it, how people cling to the relief of a single bright thing against a dim wall. She chewed her pencil, then drew boxes around the stalks that were showing her a new pattern, and wrote again, "I want real. I want the thing that lasts after the clapping ends." A week from the crash, she and Marcus were summoned to the Silver Oak Foundation, which sounded like a place made of money and wood and the sort of people who told you what to call them. The letter called her an honorary junior consultant, which made Marcus blink and read it twice. Leah smoothed the paper on the bedspread. "Honorary means they can say they listened even if they don't," she said. "Junior means they can tell me to be quiet." "Then don't be quiet," Marcus said, because he had told himself that if his girl had a gift, he would never be the one to put a lid on it. The Silver Oak conference room smelled faintly of leather. The rug had a name someone might say at a museum. Around the table were people who loved to be the smartest in the room. Leah placed her notebook in front of her, as if laying a keystone. "We're reviewing liquidity trends in big tech for the upcoming quarter," the moderator announced. He looked past Leah as if glancing through a window. Leah raised her hand and did not wait to be called on. "If Amazon keeps buying back shares at this pace," she said, "price and fundamentals will decouple. When the wind stops, the kite doesn't stay up." "Are you suggesting a correction?" someone asked, his voice making the word taste like medicine. "Yes," she said. "By February." Richard sat across from her, arms crossed, eyes that had been skeptical now slightly curious, as if wondering what it would cost to move a chair and sit beside the map instead of in front of it. "And your model?" he asked, not unkindly. "Real EPS," she said, turning the notebook. "Not adjusted tooth fairy free. Share count versus operating cash. You're measuring wind and calling it concrete." The room stilled. If she had been a young boy in a navy blazer, someone would have called it precocious. As a black girl with braids, someone called it attitude later in the hallway, frowning as if tasting something sour. She smiled at him the way her grandmother would have smiled at a man who called rain inconvenient. "Men speak like this every day," she said. "You only call it sharp when you're surprised who the knife belongs to." That evening, shoulders tight with frustration that tasted like metal, she sat on the bed while Marcus stirred a pot of beans on the stove. "They hear me when I pick the number that's about to fall," she said, "and they clap when I make them money. But when I try to explain the reason, the pattern, they ask me to soften it." "Soft is for pillows," he said, setting the spoon down. "Truth's got to stand like a post." She opened her laptop, the second-hand one with a corner taped where the casing had cracked, and typed a single sentence to her new followers. She kept it plain, left the punctuation where it belonged. "They told me not to warn you," she wrote, "but if you have skin in big tech, watch Thursday at 11:16 a.m. Marcus read it over her shoulder. "You sure, baby?" "Yes," she said. "And I'm tired of being someone's mascot." "Then we'll be our own people," he said, rubbing her back between the shoulder blades the way he had when she was little and woke from dreams too loud. "Let folks see you how you are." Thursday at 11:10, the Bronx apartment held its breath. Distant sirens threaded through like a needle pulling a city together. Leah sat on the floor with the laptop on her knees and the TV showing tickers again, as if any screen could hold what was about to rise. When the time came, the drop wasn't one cliff, but a series of ledges. Tesla lost 6, Meta slid almost 5, Alphabet 7. The NASDAQ chart trembled like a ping in a quiet room and then rang. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder and didn't say a word. In the south of Manhattan, where the rug was soft and the words on the walls were script, the Silver Oak conference room was full of an attention that verged on reverence. CNN split-screened 3 anchors and a line of numbers so red that it made the room look warmer. On one of the screens, a lower third read, "11-year-old warns street again." A director with hair the color of a winter cloud cleared his throat to say something measured, but Richard stood first. "Gentlemen," he said, and to the women in the room he added, "Ladies." He hadn't said it to sound enlightened. He said it because the word felt necessary in his mouth for the first time in a long time. "We were told." No one answered. No one had a clever phrase that would turn the air. He looked at Leah, not as if she were a cautionary tale or a walking quirk of the algorithm, but as if she were a map he'd been driving past for months. He thought of his father, a lawyer who had never raised his voice except when a referee missed a foul, and who had once said to his son, "If you can't imagine wisdom in hands that look different from yours, you'll spend your life burning bridges and calling it heat." 3 weeks later, a heavy envelope arrived with embossed edges. "National Conference on Markets and Innovation," it said. "Keynote, Leah Marcus." She read it and shook her head. "They want the story," she said to Marcus. "They always want the story." "Then tell it your way," he said. "I will on one condition." She looked at the ceiling, at the water stain shaped like a ragged leaf, as if imagining the words written up there. "I want to share the stage with Richard Ellison." When this requirement reached Richard, he read it once and put the paper down. He'd expected anger from her, or triumph. He had not expected this. The request was generous in a way that made his lungs feel heavy. He thought of the video, of 1042, of his voice saying "daycare" in a way that sounded like a door slamming. Pride flickered, threatened to roar, and then quieted on a riffle of shame. The ballroom in Chicago wore its chandeliers like a crown. Cameras were set like hunting blinds. When Leah stepped on stage, she looked too small for the podium and too large for the moment, and both things were true. "A lot of people ask me what I want to be when I grow up," she began. She did not lean forward to reach the microphone. She let the mic come to her. "But the truth is, I never wanted to be special. I just wanted to be heard." She spoke about numbers that hold, and stories that confuse weight with wind. She spoke about the way people like to believe a miracle, and how a miracle on Wall Street is typically someone else's loss dressed up in someone's quote. She did not make herself small. She did not make them comfortable. She made them quiet. Then she turned a little and looked at Richard. He stood like a man who had practiced standing and was not quite sure what to do with it. He took the microphone and said the only sentence that belonged to him. "She was right. I didn't listen because I didn't want to, and because my head could not imagine wisdom in sneakers and braids. I was wrong. Today I listen." When he finished, the applause was not for his humility, but for the way a room can change when a door opens. After the conference, a letter arrived to the Bronx stamped with a shield. Harvard. Fully funded acceleration program. No deadlines. No limits. Marcus held it like a thing that could bruise. "You going to say yes?" he asked. "Maybe," Leah said. She folded the paper the way people fold flags, carefully, seeing what it honors. "But first I need to finish what I started." What she started looked small from the outside. A channel on a site full of channels. Money Talks with Leah Marcus, She filmed the first video in the living room pressed between a window and a plant that had seen better days. "If you don't know what EPS is," she began, "it's okay. Neither did I when I was 7. She explained buybacks with a hand-drawn kite. She explained debt with a glass of water, and marbles poured in one by one until the water spilled. She posted links to free textbooks. She DM'd a teenager from Tennessee who was saving for nursing school, and a middle schooler from Oakland whose mother had 3 jobs. In one clip, she wore the same blazer she had worn to Silver Oak. In another, she wore a t-shirt from the corner bodega. The comments were different from the ones on the video that had made her famous. People didn't call her a prodigy. They thanked her for using plain words. A girl from Detroit wrote, "My math teacher says I'm too blunt, and I should smile more, but I watch your videos, and I practice saying the truth without apology." A boy from rural North Carolina said, "I thought numbers hated me. Maybe they just didn't know me yet." Leah responded to them all. She knew what it meant to need a reply. On Saturdays, she taught at the community center with Ms. Alvarez, who had given her first algebra workbook years ago and who wore her silver hair like a halo. They called the class Money and Sense, which made the kids groan and then grin. "The world will invite you to a game and tell you the rules later," Leah told them. "I'd rather you learn the rules now and choose your games." She drew charts that looked like mountains and dips that looked like the roller coaster at Coney Island. Everyone grabbed a marker and a place at the whiteboard until the board looked like one big heartbeat. "Why do they keep saying you're lucky?" a boy named DJ asked her after class. "Because it's easier than saying they missed something," she said. "Like what?" "Like me," she said. But she said it gently, not to make a wound, but to show where people had walked past. Richard did not disappear back into the world of men who could afford to forget. He wrote to her, not to advise, but to ask. He sent her a stack of books that had taught him humility late. A collection of speeches by people who had been right while the room told them they were wrong. An out-of-print memoir by a black banker who had navigated the street and come back to tell what it had cost. A slim book of poems with a line underlined 3 times. "Listen with the ear, you were scared was too soft." "Why poems?" she asked him when they finally sat across from each other at a cafe that was neither his nor hers. "Because they slow people down," he said. "I need slowing." "You and me both," she said, and they smiled like 2 people meeting in the middle of a map. Around them, the city behaved the way cities do: horns, pigeons, someone arguing with a meter. Leah could not fix all the places where the world was loud, but she could make one quiet space where numbers told the truth and people heard them. In that quiet, she felt her mother sometimes, the way you feel warmth on your back when you step near a window. Her mother had called her "my little ledger," half a joke, half a blessing. She wrote that at the top of a page and circled it. One autumn afternoon, she was walking home from school with her backpack bumping her ribs when a girl half her size stepped into her space with a kind of bravery that belonged to the very young. "You're the girl from TV," the little one said. "I'm Leah," she said. "I like numbers too," the girl blurted. "But people don't take me seriously." "My brother says girls are for cheerleading. Your brother doesn't know what he doesn't know yet," Leah said. She crouched so that their eyes were level. "Keep going. Keep writing what you see. One day, they'll be unable to ignore you." Will you write your name?" the girl asked, holding out a notebook. Leah wrote her name and then wrote, "The world needs your numbers. Don't let it trick you into silence." At home, Marcus was cooking eggs with a skill he had acquired by necessity and refined by love. "You got a package," he said, setting a white envelope on the table. The return address said, City Education Council. Inside was an invitation to speak at 6 public schools. They want you to talk about money to the 8th graders. I'll tell them what it costs to be dismissed, she said. And I'll tell them it's not a price they have to pay. He set the spatula down and rested a hand on the counter. I would have paid any price to make someone listen to your mother in the hospital, he said suddenly, the grief arriving like a guest long overdue. She knew something was wrong. The doctor said she was anxious. He clenched his jaw. I didn't know how to shout. Leah moved to his side and leaned into him, the way she had when she was 4 and the world had felt too tall. You listen to me, she said. That's the part that lasts. They stood a long moment, letting the eggs go from perfect to a little golden brown, and neither of them minded. A winter came on hard, with wind that snuck down collars and a line of frost like a thin white jaw on the window's edge. Leah filmed another series, Saving for Emergencies, and a hardware store, donated a ring light because the owner had a daughter who watched the channel before work and had decided to open a small checking account on her lunch break. Little things moved, and then bigger things. A city foundation funded a summer program under Leah's name. A teacher in Phoenix adapted her lessons into a unit. A retired accountant volunteered to check the math on all the worksheets and left notes in the margins like Valentine's. Clear as water. Good metaphor. Watch the decimals here. Sometimes Leah still went with Marcus to Barkley and Green on early mornings because old habits felt like home. Richard had learned to greet them without the quick glance that measured worth by uniform. The first time he saw Leah again in that lobby, he stepped into her space with his shoulders open. Morning, he said. It was simple and the right size. Morning, she said back. And then after a beat, I saw your op-ed. He looked as if she'd touched a bruise. He had written a piece titled, The Cost of Not Listening, and he had not made himself a hero at the end. I couldn't name all the costs, he said. You don't have to, she said. Just keep paying what you owe. He nodded. I'm trying. I can tell. On days like that, Leah felt the city itself breathe a little easier. It wasn't that the market had become kind or that money had woken up with a conscience. It was that one small signal had cut through noise, and other signals had followed it, and the room had to tilt toward that sound, or else admit to the mirror that it preferred the lie. On the anniversary of the 1042 crash, a documentary team came to the apartment. Leah had not wanted them, but she wanted the kids who watched to remember that numbers, when they are used well, are a kind of love, a way of taking care of each other in a noisy, expensive world. She let the cameras show the table with its sanded edges, the window with its leaf-shaped stain, the notebook stack held by a rubber band. She did not let them film her father's photographs in the hall. Some things were for them. What are you most proud of? The director asked, wire-thin, headphones clamped around his neck. That I didn't let them turn me into a mascot, she said, and that I learned to say hard things kindly. It's the kindly part that took work. What are you afraid of? He asked. That a little girl somewhere will watch the clip and think the point is to be famous, she said. The point is to be useful. After they left, she and Marcus took a walk along the river path. Jaw lines of ice gathered in the shadows, water moving under everything as it always does. You ever think about quitting? Marcus asked, hands tucked behind him like an old man, even though he was hardly past 40. Every other Thursday, she said. Then I look at the comments and see someone learned how to read their first 401k. Or I open a note from Miss Alvarez with a new worksheet she wants to test. Or I remember the way the room was at Silver Oak when I said wind, and every face looked like it had forgotten how to argue. She laughed softly. Then I keep going. He looked at her with a quiet that felt like pride wearing its best suit. Your mother would have loved hearing you say wind. She could read the weather in people, you know. She knew when a storm was coming, even if the forecast said clear. I know, Leah said. I think she left me that part. Spring loosened the city's shoulders. Leah filmed outside. The kite metaphor made another appearance. She watched kids in the playground repeat the movement with their hands, as if learning how to let go and hold on at the same time. Richard sent an email with a link to a scholarship set up in her mother's name for girls from public schools who wanted to study finance, and Leah wrote back, "Thank you. Please keep it small and quiet. Make it about the math, not the miracle." He replied with 2 words, "Understood, always." There were days the work felt like pushing a cart whose wheels squeaked at the first seam of marble, and she smiled at that thought because of course it felt like that. That was the sound she'd grown up to. On those days, Marcus would bring home a strawberry milkshake. "For the consultant," he'd say, winking, and she'd roll her eyes and take a long sip because sweetness has a way of telling the truth too, that life should make room for delight even when it is busy teaching you hard things. When the 2nd anniversary came, Leah chose not to go to any commemorations. She went instead to the school on the corner, where 8th graders were figuring out how to sit still and how to be loud without being cruel, and how to see themselves as more than what the street said they were. She wrote on the board, "Value equals what you can do plus what you won't do." She told them the truth costs, but you will spend more pretending you didn't see it. She showed them her first notebook, its pages thinned by erasures, and passed it around like a relic. She ended the session the way she always did, standing quietly until the room was quiet too, then saying, "You will be told what the game is. Ask who made the rules. Ask who profits from the rules. Ask whether you're allowed to make rules of your own." A boy in the back raised his hand. "Why didn't you take the billboard deal?" He said it carefully, having practiced in his head. "Because a face on a billboard isn't the same as a voice in a room," she said. "I wanted a voice. And now you have one," he said, as if he were reassuring her. "Yes," she said, "and now I have to use it well." That night she pulled the curtains wide and let the city pour into the room. Noise, light, the distant music of a car that never quite found the right station. She opened a new notebook and wrote on the first page, "Things that matter more than applause." She sat with the pen poised and smiled. There was so much to say. She would take her time. She would put the numbers in their places and the stories in theirs. She would make a map and a mirror, both. If you had asked her then what she wanted people to remember, she would have said something like this: that a girl in worn sneakers and a patient father and a stack of spiral notebooks can change how a room listens. That markets rise and fall with the weather of human beings, and human beings are stubborn and scared and also capable of learning. That humility is a better shield than arrogance, and that listening is a form of intelligence, the kind that keeps you from burning bridges and calling it heat. And if you had asked Marcus, he would have given you the simpler line he carried like a pocket-sized blessing. Everybody's light matters. He would have looked at the woman behind the register, and the man with a broom, and the kid whose hands were inked with numbers, and he would have said it again. Everybody's light. Then, because he would not be Marcus if he didn't, he would have added with a little smile, "Shines best when someone wipes the dust off it." The next morning, early as ever, he and Leah walked into Barclay and Green. Ruiz tipped his cap. The elevator hummed. The day was new and the screens were empty, and quiet blank mirrors waiting to be told who they were. Leah tucked her braid behind her ear and paused beside the brass plaque. She could see her reflection and her father's reflection, and faintly, the room behind them where decisions were made. She thought of the little girl on the sidewalk and the boy in the back row, and Ms. Alvarez's looping cursive comments, and Richard's slow yes, and her mother's soft smile. "Ready?" Marcus asked. She nodded. "Ready." They stepped forward together, the squeak of the cart sounding exactly like a prologue. In the end, Leah didn't demand to be believed, she invited us to listen. Her gift wasn't magic, it was attention, courage, and the choice to speak truth with kindness. The market crashed at 10:42, but the deeper collapse was our habit of ignoring wisdom that arrives in worn sneakers and quiet rooms. Real maturity is learning to ask, whose data am I dismissing because of my bias? Who's not at the table and why? If you've ever been the wrong mouth, keep showing up. If you hold a microphone, share it. Let your success be measured by how many others rise with you. If this story moved you, drop a comment. A moment when someone finally listened to you, or the name of a person who saw what others missed. Subscribe and turn on notifications to join our community of everyday miracles. Share this with someone who needs a nudge to speak or to listen.